What is up, everybody? It is late night. It is after 9:30 my time, 11:30 Eastern time. So I'm gonna make this a quick live stream. Just thought I would hop on here for a short couple minutes and talk about some bed fishing baits that I'm looking forward to throwing this upcoming year. So hope you all are having a good Saturday night and are doing well in general. We are here at the tail end of winter, and you know what that means. Spring is coming up, which which means pre-spawn is right around the corner, and eventually the spawn is gonna happen. So it's already happening in some parts of the South, has already passed us by in like parts of Florida, but for the most part around the country, we're gonna be seeing bedding fish come April and May for the most part. So I just wanted to very quickly go over, in my opinion, 5 of the top bed fishing baits that I'm going to utilize this spring, which for me is going to be really end of April all the way through early June. So anyway, Daniel, what's up, dude? Clayton, how you doing? Thanks for hanging out, guys. Hope you are doing well. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button real quick, and we'll get into this in just 1 second. As I said, this is going to be a very short live stream, probably in the ballpark of a half an hour. So I've just got roughly 5 categories that we're going to fly through. I'm going to show you guys a couple of my very specific baits that I plan to throw this year, tell you about some stuff that I've had success on in the past, and yeah, I'd love to know your guys' opinions, and if you have any baits that you've had a lot of success on in the past when fishing for spawning fish. Now, for whatever reason, it is a little bit of a controversial topic, especially when talking about bed fishing in bass tournaments, because in that situation, you really can harm the population of bass in that body of water. If you're removing them from their beds for any substantial period of time, especially putting them in a live well and leaving, yeah, it's inevitable that that's going to mess up the future generation of that bass. So keep in mind that it's important that you practice catch and release if you are bed fishing. And the sooner you can get that fish back in the water and safely back to its bed, the better. But in my opinion, it does no damage if you catch the fish and release it within a minute or two, because 9 times out of 10, that fish is going to swim right back to the bed, and there's not going to be enough time that has passed in order for, you know, bluegill, crawfish, lizards, creatures of any kind to come and really do damage to the eggs that those bass are protecting. So let's get right into it. Daniel says he was going to buy a bona fide SS-107. Right on, dude. That would be pretty sweet. The guy blocked you for no reason at all. What do you mean by that? He blocked you. Where were you going to buy it and who from? All right, guys, what up? Bassless chap Ron Holly's in the house. We're going to go over some bed fishing baits, some of my personal favorites, what I think is most effective. The main thing to keep in mind during this time of year when fish are bedding, not this time of year necessarily being that it's late February, but when you see fish on beds, is that it's going to be around hard bottom and it's going to be a cleared spot. So for the most part, you can throw presentations that that are a little bit more exposed when it comes to the hook. You don't always need to throw something that is super weedless or Texas rigged necessarily. So you're going to see a relatively common theme here, that the vast majority of these lures are ones that the hook can be set pretty easily. Okay? Gonna buy it off Facebook. You're gonna pick it up tomorrow, and the guy just blocked you on Messenger. That's weird, man. Sorry to hear that, Daniel. Russ Dennis, what's up, dude? All right, guys, first category, first topic, as for bed fishing baits, is a bluegill swim bait. here's going to be one of my go-tos this year. And this right here is the smaller 4-inch version of the Savage Gear Pulse Tail Bluegill. As you can see, this is a top hook, exposed hook version. They do make these baits in a weedless version that comes with an EWG style hook, but that is totally not necessary with this bait or this application. So the cool thing about this tail, the 4D Pulse Tail, is that it has a very subtle, natural kick on it. This tail was designed and mimics, say, the Huddleston tail pretty dang well. And a couple things that I really like about this bait are, one, the absolute realism in the design. Savage Gear did a really good job of designing this bait to look exactly like a bluegill. It swims well. It's got a very subtle, good-looking action. The other thing is that it's got a rattle in it. I believe it's in the tail. Maybe it's right in the middle of the body. So anyway, this bait is going to make a little bit of noise as it ticks the bottom and moves through that bed. But you can scoot this thing across the bottom pretty slowly, or you can swim it through in order to get the fish's attention and then kind of dead stick it right in the middle of the bed in order for fish to come over and attack it. So if you guys didn't already know, bluegill and bass kind of go to war during the spring. Bluegill are going to be bedding around the same time as the bass, usually a little bit later, but either way, bluegill are arguably the biggest threat to bass when they are on beds, because bluegill will come up and feed on those eggs, and bass absolutely hate bluegill being around their beds. So a bluegill swim bait is my #1 lure. That was the 4-inch Savage Gear Pulse Tail 4D, and this one is just a 5-inch Scottsboro Tackle swim bait with an exposed jig head on it. This is the Squadron head from Strike King. That's another pretty good option. And then more likely, if you want to go smaller than that 4-inch, I would go down to the Megabass Dark Sleeper. Something in either like this is, I think, the 3/8 ounce version. So 3/8, 1/2 are substantial enough to really maintain bottom contact and do what you need to do. What's cool about the Dark Sleeper is it has this top fin on both sides that hides the hook. But what you'll find is that it really does not keep the bait weedless so much as just look more realistic. So this bait has a little bit of a bait fish and a goby profile, somewhere in between. And it's got a swim bait tail on the back that kicks more aggressively than you would think. But you can work this bait really slowly, and it's extremely balanced. The weight is right in the bottom of the bait, so it will sit upright and not roll over like, say, that Scottsboro Tackle swim bait would. When you dead stick it on bottom, this thing is going to roll on its side just like any other bait. And for the most part, the Savage Gear probably will too, but I'm going to be scooting this through the bed, stirring up the bottom more than anything, whereas the Megabass Dark Sleeper, I'm more likely to just pitch right onto the bed, or occasionally pitch past the bed and hop it or swim it and kill it right onto the bed. So it's going to have more action as it approaches and then just sits straight in the middle. And it's going to look more natural than the other presentations when dead sticked. So first category is a bluegill swim bait. Those are 3 of my choices, though there are a lot of others that you could use. Sorry to hear that, Daniel. I hope you are able to figure out a kayak situation soon, especially before the season really kicks off. I saw Bass and Bill Matthews posted on Instagram earlier today that he got out on the water in Michigan for the first time just recently, caught his first open water fish of the year. So it's about that time of year for you, man, and I hope it all works out. So Clayton says, have you had much luck on the Dark Sleeper? Actually, yes, I have. So I've got a bunch of them around, and I throw them in probably 4 or 5 different colors and a few different weights depending on the depth that I'm fishing. So 3/8 and a half ounce are the most common ones that I use, but I do have them all the way up to like, I think this is the 1 ounce, almost 4 inch size. So what's cool about the dark sleeper, like I said, is it's really a hybrid style bait, and it's somewhere in between a jig, a swim bait, and like a tube, so it imitates a number of different things, bait that fish eat. So whether it's a fish or a goby, um, it does a really good job of appearing realistic. So fish eat it quite well. The only couple things that you want to pay attention to are the fact that the hook on it is relatively small. So you do have to swing on them pretty hard and then set your drag pretty light. So that's one thing that's a little bit tricky. I just tripped out. Maybe my phone is acting up. I don't know what's going on. Sorry about that, guys. So anyway, the dark sleeper is a great bait and it gets eaten really well. But one, it's got that small hook on there. Two, it doesn't have the best durability. You'll find that after a couple fish, the eyes fall off and the body really starts to wear down. So it's only going to last you maybe 10 or 15 fish at most. But the bigger thing to worry about with the dark sleeper is actually the weedlessness of it. So it's going to be tempting to fish this in a variety of scenarios, but it's not that weedless. So like I mentioned, these fins hide the hook fairly well, but they don't act like a weed guard nearly as much as you would think. It's placed on the bait to look like a weed guard, and I think they even claim that in how they market the bait, but it does not act very weedless. So I've lost a handful of them, which is unfortunate because at $6 a bait, they're not exactly cheap for a soft plastic swim bait, but they do catch a lot of fish. So if you're fishing this around cover or where you're a little bit more prone to lose the bait, what I will do is actually take one of these fins and pull it forward toward the head of the bait, and then I will tuck the hook into the fin itself. So that's what I've done here, and now the bait is a lot more weedless, and you have to set the hook harder in order to penetrate this fin that I've tucked the hook into. So let me know if you guys can see that right there. How you can kind of skin hook the fin itself, and that will help. So a couple little things about the dark sleeper there that are worth noting. Now, number two, and I would say arguably the biggest predator to bass, one of the things that they find most irritating and intrusive on their beds is a creature or lizard type of bait. So I would say the Zoom lizard is probably the most common bait used for bed fishing, just period, and historically. So this is a smaller, I think, 5-inch version of the Zoom lizard and a watermelon color, which I ordinarily wouldn't use. I would say most common thing people are throwing is like the 6-inch white lizard. However, I don't have any of those on me, and I probably won't get any for this season. Now, you can throw a wide variety of creature or lizard style baits. You can throw a brush hog, a lizard, whatever, but here's a really niche bait right here, and this is the River to Sea Nest Raider. This is a pretty wicked little bait here. They used to make this bait a number of years ago in a much larger version, and it didn't sell very well. Okay, I'm not sure if it was because the bait was too big or if it's just too niche of a bait itself. And so it went out of production. And then I think last year or the year before, then they started making this bait again. And so again, this is called the Nest Raider. And it looks exactly like a salamander. Really creepy looking. And it's got this long spade tail on the back. So essentially, this is weighted just like the dark sleeper and will stand up perfectly or just lay down without rolling over when at rest on bottom. So you're going to just pitch this right onto the bed or just past and drag it into the bed, and fish are not going to be able to stand it. So I really like this size. I think this is a 5-inch bait, if I'm not mistaken. Something like an ounce. Yeah, 5-inch, 3/4 of an ounce. So this bait costs like $7 or something like that, but is almost made exclusively for bed fishing. So I thought it was a pretty cool deal. Purchased it before last year and then just didn't have it on me. Wasn't expecting to be doing bed fishing when I actually did. So I didn't have it with me to use. So let's move on from creatures, lizards, salamander style lures for sure. That was number 2. Number 3, and I'm going to kind of blend 2 categories into one, and that is the Ned Rig and the tube. Okay? The reason that I'm putting them together is that you can present them a little bit differently, and I would recommend that you do. So, a Ned Rig is one that, typically speaking, is supposed to stand up vertically. You're going to fish this on a lightweight mushroom style jig head. So I like something in the ballpark of 1/10 to 1/16 of an ounce. Something that's going to have a very slow fall on it, be easy to move. This is the Trocar Pro V tungsten jig head. It's got a really perfect bait keeper made for a Laztec. It's got that double barbed plastic bait keeper on there. It does have a tungsten head and a unique kind of O'Shaughnessy style shape to the hook. Now this is the Z-Man 3-inch baby goat that I'm using as the trailer. You can use any old Ned Rig bait, but for the most part, I would recommend that you use a floating plastic. So anything from Z-Man would be great. The TRD ticklers, the TRD craws, TRD bugs, any of those would be great, as well as some of the other non-Z-Man soft plastics that do a great job of floating. I've talked about these before, but the main ones that I would recommend are the Yum Ned Dinger or Ned Craw, the X Zone Lures Ned Zone, and the 6 cents Ned Fry, if you cut it down to be a little bit more traditional Ned Rig size in the like 2.5 to 3-inch size. So you're going to pitch this and fish it just like you would the last couple that I'm mentioning. You're not going to approach the bed other than just pitch it straight on and watch for a reaction. I think white is one of the best colors to use for bed fishing, mostly because you, the angler, will be able to see the bait as best as possible. The water's not always going to be crystal clear. A lot of times, fish will clear a bed out where there's grass or other things around, and you won't be able to see every last detail of what is happening. So to be able to see the bait disappear, even if it's for a split second, that gives you every little advantage that you need, because fish are not actively feeding at that point in time. They're just protecting their bed. So what you'll get a lot of times is fish picking up your bait by the back, taking it off and dropping it, or sucking it in and spitting it right back out. So it's important to be able to see what's going on, and when you see them attack the bait, to set the hook. Okay? So Ned Rig, I'm not going to go into a bunch of other combinations because it is what it is, and there's a million different baits on the market. But the other thing that is a little bit similar is a tube. Cool thing about a tube is it's going to have a totally different action, totally different profile, and fish will respond to that. So especially smallmouth, but also largies, like a good tube. So if you're fishing around beds that are in slightly deeper water, a tube can be extremely deadly because of the way that it acts. So on the fall, a tube is going to spiral down. When you twitch a tube and let it fall, it's going to be a whole lot more erratic in nature. And it has generally a heavier weight and a larger exposed hook on it. So couple things to keep in mind there that are just going to make it different than the Ned Rig. So you're going to just get a slightly larger profile and a different action than you would out of a Ned Rig. Also, when it's killed, it's going to lay down. A tube is never going to stand up unless you're using like the Z-Man Easy tubes, for example, or the Ned Rig size TRD tubes, which are also great options, but are going to fall more into that category of the Ned Rig than the tube in terms of how they act, how it looks to the fish. So, yeah, Russ, you definitely could, but when bed fishing, I would usually not rig a tube stupid style, just because, like I mentioned at the beginning of this stream, you typically don't need a weedless presentation when fishing on beds. So that said, if you're fishing a tube or something that's exposed and you're getting hung up in and around the bed, then I guess you might want to rig it weedless and go to something like a stupid tube. But for the most part, when bed fishing, I'm gonna throw a traditional exposed jig head. You know, there are a number of different tube heads and shapes that you could use, but Ned Rig and tube is number 3. Okay, number 4, just a little bit more aggressive than a tube or a Ned Rig, is going to be a jig. Okay, you can go big, you can go small. I've got a wide range here that I'll show you. First would be something like this 6 Sense Divine hybrid jig. I like the option too, Russ. Honestly, I like a stupid tube, especially when throwing in places that are a little bit more heavy in cover, when pond fishing and when fishing around brush or in trees. If you want the tube to slide back, that's where the stupid tube really comes into play, because it has a totally different action in how it slides back to you. So anyway, the stupid tube is a cool rigging, and I really like the Kitech tubes, the salty core tubes for that rigging. You might want to check those out. So if you're going bigger on a jig, I like to stay in kind of this medium size. This is a hybrid jig from 6 Sense. It's got a pretty big hook on there, a very medium brush guard, not too thick, definitely not too light. And then on it as a trailer, I've got the new Guggen baits, Rattle and Chunk. Okay, trailer and jig don't matter too much, because it's more about the profile and the action of what you get out of this presentation. So you're going to get the flow from the skirt, you're going to get the action out of the tails, and it's just about stirring stuff up with a jig. Now, if something bigger like this is too intimidating, if you're finding that fish are finicky. If they're running away from the bed and hanging out 5 or 10 feet away, or maybe just kind of coming back close-ish but are not willing to attack the bait, then I would step down. First, I would go to something like a finesse jig. This is the Strike King tour grade finesse football jig, and this is like a 1/4 ounce. It's got a lighter wire hook on there. As you can see, side by side, the hook is like half the size. I want to say this hybrid jig has like a 4/0, maybe even a 5/0 hook on there. And then this finesse jig has probably like a 2/0, at most 3/0. Weed guard is about the same, maybe even a little bit lighter on it. As you can see, the skirt is cut very finessey. It's got that short top, and then I'll trim down a trailer. So here I've got like the Z-Man Turbo Craws, and I've cut probably 3/4 of an inch off of it. And I like the Turbo Craws because it's the Laztec. It's going to stand up, have a little bit more subtle but wavy type of action, almost more like a beaver than a craw. You know, the rattle and chunk is essentially the same kickers as the Kraken craw or like the Rage craw. Going to be a little bit more aggressive. So that's one where you might want to come in hot and swim across the bed first to see how the fish are reacting, to see what gets their attention, maybe hop the bait in and past the bed before then you start working it slower. The finesse jig is when you're not getting as much attention, and then you could step down from there, go to even a slightly more finessey presentation. This is like the Jewel finesse jig. It's got rattles on it and a tiny little Kitech crazy flapper in the 2.8 inch. Okay. How's the hook on that Turbo Craw? You mean on this is the Strike King tour grade finesse jig. I would say, yeah, it's braid ready, but I wouldn't throw it on 50-pound braid unless you're going to loosen up your drag a little bit. So it's a medium wire. You know, if you're going to be using 30-pound braid, not a problem whatsoever. I'm usually going to throw it on 12, maybe 15-pound fluorocarbon. Not too worried about it. Typically speaking, when I'm bed fishing, I'm going to throw fluorocarbon as opposed to straight braid. But yeah, if you're doing straight braid or braid to a fluorocarbon leader, not an issue. Okay. Lastly, if you really need to go finessey on them, this is like a cross between the jig and the Ned Rig, and this would be the Kitech Mono Spin. Okay? No, not going to work for punching. Definitely not. For a couple reasons. One, because it's a finesse jig. It's a football jig, and it's got a light weed guard and a light hook. So it is a finesse jig in all the senses. So if you're flipping, no, dude, I'd go to something more like the 6 Sense Divine hybrid jig if you're looking to actually flip. But otherwise, I would just go to a punch setup. Straight up, I'd throw an ounce flipping weight, peg that thing, throw on a straight shank flipping hook, either from Trocar or Owner, and I'd throw a beaver on the back of that, you know, a D-bomb or a Rage Craw. Something of the sort, maybe even the new Z-Man Goat, and just go to work. If you're going to be flipping, pitching, punching, but we're talking about traditional bed fishing in shallow water where you can see the beds. So ordinarily, you're not going to be punching, okay? Last presentation we're going to talk about is a worm, okay? Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can rig a worm, especially for bed fishing. And I would recommend like 3 different ways in particular. So one is going to be just a straight up wacky rig. And I would throw, we talked about wacky rig baits last week, but first I would start with something relatively big and relatively bright. So this is like the 6-inch Bass Pro Shop Sticko, very close to the Yamamoto Senko, okay? It's going to have a pretty exaggerated action on the fall. If they're not going for something bright, go to something a little bit more natural. This is like a half green pumpkin, half watermelon red. And I would just throw an O-ring on there and wacky rig it straight in the middle, okay? If they're not eating a wacky rig, I would go to either a Texas rig or, more importantly, something that's going to stand the bait up more so. So Nico rig would be my next option. Essentially what you're doing is just taking that wacky rig and putting a nail weight in the nose of the bait. So this right here is the Z-Man Bang Sticks, one of my favorite Nico rig worms. Not only is it a Laztec, but it's got the same tentacles as the hula sticks or the TRD ticklers on top of the bait. And Z-Man made these Nico weights, which have a double barb on them, plastic, just like that keeper that I showed you on that Trocar Ned head. And just a mushroom style head, and it sticks straight into the bait, okay? So very cool design. You do have to go slowly with how you rig this thing in order for it to go in straight and for it to stay properly. As you can see, I didn't put it in there perfectly straight right now. But what's cool about it is you're going to maintain really solid bottom contact. And with a Laztec, you don't have to use an O-ring. You're not going to tear the bait. You're not going to lose baits because of that. And then you're going to use the same hook that you would for the wacky rig. So, one of my favorites to use is like the Owner Mosquito Light hook. Usually in the size 1 or the 1/0 are really good enough in my opinion. You don't really need a weedless hook for that. But if you do want to go weedless or need to, then I would throw a shaky head. So this is another Trocar tungsten shaky head, and this is a floating worm by Z-Man. It's their finesse worms in the 7-inch size. Really like the bait keeper up on this guy. Just rig this like you would a shaky head. Cool thing is you can tuck the hook straight into the plastic. You can bury it in and not worry about the hook penetrating the plastic. A Laztec is very soft and very durable, so you can just bury a hook in it, and what happens is the hook will penetrate and not rip the plastic like ever. So you can catch a million fish. You can re-rig this thing however you need to, and go back to work. So they do make this bait in a 4-inch that I would probably use a little bit more frequently than the 7. But if you do need to size down, another bait that I like from Z-Man is the Finesse Shads. So here I've got it rigged on, this is the Lifted Jigs Ned EWG hook. So this is a mushroom style jig head with a 1/0 VMC EWG hook on there. So essentially this is just a weedless Ned rig. So bridges the gap between shaky head and Ned rig there. So as you can see, I kind of bridged the gap with almost all of these categories. We started with bluegill swim bait, and I talked about the dark sleeper being kind of that bridge. Then we talked about the Ned rig, and I talked about the tube kind of bridging that next gap, having a different action on it. Then we talked about creatures. I didn't really talk about a bridge on that one. I just talked about the wicked nest raider from river to sea. Then we talked about jigs, talk about going big or stepping all the way down to finesse jigs, micro jigs, and then we talked about worms, wacky rig, shaky head, Nico rig, and yeah, so that just about does it in terms of the 5 categories that I wanted to address this evening. I'm going to try and answer a couple questions if you guys have them, and then dip out of here relatively soon. So I appreciate you guys hanging out. What do you guys want to talk about? What do you want to know? Wonk Fish says, what are like the best places to fish a Nico rig? That's a good question, man. There are a lot of places you can fish a Nico rig, but typically speaking, you're going to want to fish it around hard bottom. Okay? So rock would be my main suggestion, just because if you're fishing around wood, you are a little bit prone to snagging up. The cool thing is, if you rig this properly and you fish the Nico rig with the hook point up, okay, which is proper, you don't want to have it facing down, because with it up, the eye of the hook acts a little bit like a weed guard. So you'll be able to push this through brush a little bit, though you are prone to snagging a little bit as well. If you rig it down, like some people might suggest, I think even Mike Iaconelli has been guilty of suggesting this, then the hook is just fully exposed all the time. And this will stick right into wood every single time. So because you're usually fishing this like you would a wacky rig, it's an exposed hook. And so it's not going to do great around grass or around wood. So rock is your friend when it comes to the Nico rig. But you can fish it shallow, you can fish it deep. Doesn't really matter. Only thing is, if you're fishing around a riprap, you are prone to getting caught in between the rocks, right? So just keep that in mind. You said you always wanted to try one, but didn't know where you should throw them. Dude, anywhere you have sand or rock, a little bit more sparse cover, I would definitely throw it. So it does really well in shallow water if you're fishing from the bank, and you've got a little bit of rock, and it's not too woody or weedy. Ron says, would that river to sea nest raider do well in ponds? Yes, I think it'll do well anywhere that you've got beds. As I said, though, this is really a specialty bait. This is almost exclusively a bed fishing bait. So I'm not going to fish this anywhere, anytime other than the spawn. So it is meant to fish on beds, and that is that. So when you see a bed, you see that clearing of lighter patch or absolutely clear bottom, that's where you're going to take this thing, pitch it on. So it doesn't matter whether you're fishing in a pond, a lake, a reservoir, wherever, even a river. The location doesn't matter, because the bed is going to be clear. Okay? Nate says use a light weight around the rock. Yeah, no, definitely. Nate makes a good point. When it comes to the Nico rig, you're going to want to throw as light of a weight as you can get away with, relative to the depth that you're fishing. So, in my opinion, the most versatile weight is like a 1/10 ounce for anything in that 1 to 10 or 15 feet deep. But if you're fishing deeper than that, you might want to go heavier, up to like a 1/4 ounce. If you're fishing shallower or you're fishing around a lot of rock, then yeah, you're going to want to go or if it's chunky rock where you're more prone to getting caught between the rocks, then I would go as light as possible down to like a 1/16th or even a 1/32nd, depending on the worm and style weight that you're using. If you're not using a Laztec and these specific weights that are made, you're just using nail weights, tungsten or lead, you can use a weight as small as 1/32nd. So the cool thing about it is the weight in the nose is going to cause the worm to fall vertically. Now, if you're not using an Elastec style worm, you're going to have to work the bait a little bit more steadily or aggressively, in my opinion. Some people feel mixed about this and feel that it's just about the fall, that it falls straight down and vertically, and they don't mind then the bait falling over once it hits bottom. But the point is, once you work the bait, it's going to have that wacky rig pulse to it, and then it's going to fall back down vertically. I like the bait to stand up at rest before I'm working the bait again. I don't like for it to fall down because then it has a weird look to it. I like when it stands up and then I'm pulsing it sideways. It's almost like just the opposite orientation of a traditional wacky rig that is going to fall horizontally. And then you're going to pull it up and it's going to fall horizontally. So, just my opinion though, okay? Russ Dennis says, hey, what do you think about the VMC spin shots? I'm not quite sure. Can you explain, Russ? Is it like the swivel shot from Gamakatsu? Is it like this style hook? I do too, Nate, but I like the bait to stand up, kind of like a large style Ned Rig, just an oversized Ned Rig. And again, that's personal preference. I just find that when using a lot of traditional Senko style baits that are a little bit more salted, you know, the Yamamoto Daiwa Nico Fat bait that they made specifically for the Nico rig, I haven't enjoyed it very much, to be honest with you. So, Russ, you said you like to drop shot wacky rig? For sure. That's a great presentation right there. So, if I'm not mistaken, Russ, I think you're talking about this style of hook. And essentially, it is a wacky rig drop shot type of hook with a swivel built into it. So I like that because you can drop your line from here to your weight and just tie directly to the swivel. It's going to prevent line twist significantly when drop shotting. It will affect your hookup ratio just a little bit, but for the most part, I really like this concept, and I do use it on a drop shot, okay? Not all the time, but yeah, definitely less line twist. You're right about that, Ross. That is essentially the whole point. So just building a swivel into the system right at the hook, it's a great idea. Okay? Any other questions that you guys have? Anything else you want to talk about this evening before I dip out of here? I'm sorry for getting on so late this evening. Just had a little bit of, complications on my end. My wife is at work. She's 39 weeks pregnant. And so I'm a little bit anxious about that. And my 5-year-old daughter was having a tough time going to bed tonight. So we were goofing around a little bit late. And also, my dog was acting absolutely crazy. We didn't manage to get outside with her today. And I don't know, she was anxious, running around like a freak. So I had to take her out before hopping on here and check in with my wife, make sure everything was going okay. So anyway, guys, any questions, concerns, recommendations, any other bed fishing baits that you guys like to throw, any opinions on the baits that I mentioned tonight, any suggestions of what you think we should talk about next time I hop on here, or anything you'd like to see me make a video about, let me know. Thank you very much, Russ. I appreciate you, dude. Thanks for hanging out tonight. Hope you have a great one yourself. Nate says, yeah, man, I only use floating worms or craws. Z-Man just hates storing them, even brand new bags I had in my boat. I guess they just don't like the heat. Yeah, Nate, that's the unfortunate thing about Elastec. They're just, they're sensitive, dude. They're introverts. They don't like the heat. They don't like other baits. So yeah, you got to have creative ways to store them, and you have to be aware of where they are. So if your boat is out in the heat, you got to bring your baits inside. But the main two ways that I like to store my Z-Man baits when they're not on the wall behind me are like this, okay? I use the Z-Man bait binders. You can fit like 10 bags of soft plastics in this little guy. This is tiny, but effective. I use it for my chatterbait trailers. And then I also like these boxes. I want to say Plano makes these, but I'm not positive who does. And what's cool is they're double-sided. So you can store, let's see, I've got my bang sticks, my big TRDs. You can fit about 4 or 5 packs of soft plastics per side. And then you've got little compartments on the sides as well. So I keep my Nico hooks and weights here. So you can see I've got my Nico Shrooms weights there. I've got my TRD spinners there. And then on the other side, I like to keep some hooks stored in here. And then, you know, I've got Z-Man fatties, those finesse worms I showed you, as well as the Strike King Zeros. So, you know, I can keep 10 or so packs of soft plastics in one of these boxes, as well as a bunch of terminal tackle. And, you know, that's the same size as like a 3600 deep or something like that. Pretty reasonably sized. Yeah. Flat as a quarter? What the heck, Nate? Only thing I would say, after a little bit of experience, is don't put your baits, don't take them out of the plastic bags and put them in boxes, because they warp boxes as bad as anything. Even if you're putting them in boxes exclusively, not with other types of soft plastics, it's just that style of plastic. The elastic material warps the plastic. It doesn't melt. It warps the plastic pretty bad. So Zoom is the only other company that I'm aware of that creates really bad warping, but Z-Man is the other one. So it will ruin your soft plastic boxes, or your plastic boxes that you're storing them in. So it's best to keep them aside. But, you know, if you've got a boat, another thing you can do is just stash them in these little tubs, okay? This is like a shoebox from Walmart. These are made by Sterilite. And honestly, you could fit probably 20 or 30 packs of soft plastics in one of these. So if you look in this one, these are all drop shot soft plastics, and I've got probably 20 packs in here, and it's starting to get crowded, but yeah, I would say it comfortably fits about 20 packs, and I really like that. So if you've got a little bit more room to store your baits, and you've got a little compartment in your boat, that would probably be my suggestion. But yeah, feel free to hit me up if you got any suggestions otherwise, or ideas, and you want to brainstorm, whatever, dude. That's stuff that I'm always thinking about too. So anyway, guys, I think I'm going to get out of here. Really appreciate you guys hanging out. If you haven't already, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button, and feel free to leave a comment. Hit me up on social media, send me an email, whatever, and I'm always willing to chat. So thanks for hanging out tonight. Hope you enjoyed the video. It was a little bit shorter of a video tonight, but that's because I hopped on late and kind of thought about the topic, a little late. I've just had spring fishing and bed fishing on the mind. So anyway, guys, have a great rest of your night. Have a good weekend. I'll see you on the flip side. By the next time I see you, I'll probably have another baby, third child in my life. So I might not be on next weekend, but I'll be out of here just for a short period of time, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for hanging out. Cheers.